but just a little backstory. Once a year, we take our teens on a social justice themed trip. This year, we went with Tzedek America to on a civil rights themed trip throughout the South, mostly Alabama and Georgia. And so what our teens are going to share about is some of the reflections on our experiences. We heard from some amazing speakers. We went to the beautiful exhibits. We saw some amazing historical places. It was such a fulfilling experience. And we had such an amazing group, and these are some of our teens who were on our trip. So I'm going to stop talking now because they're going to come on up.
I know, but we have to share. Okay. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Over this past MLK weekend, we were given the wonderful opportunity to travel through and learn about the American South with the Roman teens from New York.
We were given an eye-opening exploration of history and freedom, guided by passionate leaders like T. Marie King, Madam Joanne Bland, Mr. Terry Chestnut, Pastor Gwen Webb, and many more. We delved deep into the heart of the civil rights movement, beginning our trip in Birmingham.
In downtown Birmingham, despite the rain, we walked the historic streets, inspired by the stories of young activists. Pastor Gwen Webb's words and the immersive exhibits at the Civil Rights Institute brought so much perspective and the necessary background knowledge to prepare us for the trip.
Our morning concluded at the 16th Street Baptist Church, one of the first of many once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to learn about the history that happened right beneath our feet. Shabbat in Montgomery was a blend of spirituality and fun. Friday night, we dove in together and enjoyed a unique murder mystery dinner.
Saturday morning, we prayed with our feet, walking through the streets of Montgomery, exploring landmarks of historical significance while connecting our prayers to each location's story.
Soon after, we visited the Legacy Museum, an amazing opportunity that was interactive, emotional, and eye-opening. Sunday morning at the First Baptist Church in Selma, we loved and appreciated the spirit that the congregation showed to us, and how welcoming they all were towards our group.
Guided by locals like Terry Chestnut and in memory of his father, J.L. Chestnut, we walked in the footsteps of civil rights activists, crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge with solemn reverence, a powerful experience for us all.
After each speaker and activity, we met in our debrief groups to reflect on our emotions and thoughts that arose after we all learned. I can confidently say that we all found this very worthwhile as we fully processed the events, stories, and history that we were so lucky to learn during the trip.
Our time together was a testament to the power of knowledge, empathy, and history. We're all so lucky that we were given this opportunity, and we want to thank everyone that made it happen.
May the spirit of this journey continue to inspire us on our paths towards justice and equality.
Now let's hear from our peers with a more in-depth reflection of the many stories we learned on our trip.
Hello, I'm India.
I'm Hannah. Shabbat Shalom.
During our time sorry. During our time in Birmingham, we had the pleasure of meeting and hearing the story of Pastor Gwendolyn Webb, who participated in the Children's Crusade in 1963 when she was 14. She told us about how she was one of the leaders of the children's groups, and as a head cheerleader, she snuck out of school through the windows when they weren't allowed to join the march. She was arrested along with hundreds of other protesters and held in jail for 7 days. Her story was incredible, and she led us in singing some freedom songs that were sung during these demonstrations.
Despite her experiences with the police forces, Pastor Gwen went on to become a police officer and was the second female African-American officer ever admitted into the Birmingham Police Department. Later in life, she became a minister. Her story is truly inspiring, and it was incredible to meet Pastor Gwen and hear about her experiences and courage. That was just the beginning of our extraordinary trip through Alabama and through civil rights history.
Oh, wait. Okay. Hi, I'm Ivy. Okay. I would like to share a little bit about the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. The Legacy Museum is a museum curated by the Equal Justice Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization founded by Brian Stevenson. It is truly a place like no other because of the comprehensive and immersive experience it provides to detail the Black experience in America, starting from the slave trade up until modern day. It's the kind of place where you can spend days on end inside and still not have read every blurb or looked at every image. What stood out to me specifically was how humanizing the history was and how it was presented. At the beginning of the museum's exhibit, as you learn through the early slave trade and slavery in the American colonies, the rooms and screens are filled with numbers that represent the amount of people killed, enslaved, and kidnapped. There's so much data presented to document the trauma the Middle Passage and slave trade brought in early colonial times, all in very large and very haunting numbers. However, the more you move through the museum and learn about slavery, lynching, segregation, and mass incarceration in chronological order, these numbers start to be replaced with names and faces. The walls of the museum become populated with activists and victims, quotes and stories, traumas and triumphs. Every piece of this exhibit is so specifically curated to provide the most impactful experience possible, and it shows. For me personally, the section on lynching was the most powerful. Seeing rows of names and quotes from people who were murdered and images showing the rates of lynching across the country were so important to understand. The museum culminates in the Legacy Room, which is covered wall to wall, floor to ceiling, of portraits of Black people who fought for justice and freedom. No numbers, just faces. The room is gold and there's music and it is truly beautiful. The transition from all the numbers at the beginning of the museum to all the faces gave me and our group as a whole a more complex and thorough understanding of the Black experience in America and how it is a story of people, community, and experiences. A 15-minute walk from the Legacy Museum is the Memorial for Peace and Justice, another experience that we were privileged to get, which is an outdoor memorial to honor and recognize every Black person who was lynched in the South, with respect to the many more who went undocumented and unknown in regards to their murder. This memorial is also under the Equal Justice Initiative, and it is a space where, for each county in the South, there's a cinder block about the size of a coffin with the names of people who were lynched and the year engraved in the stones. I remember beginning the walk and thinking to myself, I'm going to read every single name and say it under my breath as I go through this memorial. Well, I quickly realized how impossible that would be. We had limited time and there were thousands of names. And equally importantly, as you walk through the path, the ground begins to slope downwards and these coffin-like cinder blocks begin to sort of rise above you. It's very moving and something that I don't think I can describe properly. The stones, some of them said unknown 20 times, just repeated. Some had names that are the same as people in my family, and some said, at least blank many people were lynched during blank massacre. This was all very real and very scary. But yet, the memorial is so unique. It is simple in its presentation, but not at all bland. It made me feel the power of a name and the power that is remembrance, because for the many lives taken due to lynching, remembrance and the fight for a more just world is what we can do to move forward and what we owe. Walking through this memorial, I also felt a connection to my Judaism and how we approach grief and loss. It gave me a new perspective on why we sit Shiva and say the mourner's Kaddish every Shabbat. And those things feel more real and powerful to me now, after having the civil rights trip experience. And so I want to leave you with a quote that is displayed at the end of the memorial. For the hanged and beaten, for the shot, drowned, and burned, for the tortured, tormented, and terrorized, for those abandoned by the rule of law. We will remember, with hope, because hopelessness is the enemy of justice, with courage, because peace requires bravery, with persistence, because justice is a constant struggle, with faith, because we shall overcome. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Hello. Oh, I've always wanted to use one of these. I am here to follow up that great, rousing speech, and I'm honestly scared. My name's Dante. I went on the trip to Alabama with the rest of this beautiful class that is standing right over here, and I'm here to talk about the Legacy Museum. So there were a couple of things that I thought were relatively striking. First, when you get through the first room, which is, like Ivy mentioned, a bunch of numbers, they count up to the millions. It's unbelievable. Like, you learn about that stuff in class, but it's not to that amount of specificity. The hallway you walk through to get to the next part is a bunch of heads buried in the sand, and some of them are in shackles, and some of them have parts mutilated or maimed, and that is incredibly, incredibly powerful to me. The second thing that I thought was most interesting was the room that described lynching, and not described lynching, but showed the victims of the lynching. All that was left of them were ashes in jars, and under each of the jars were names, and under each of the jars were names, and there were so many names. I had heard of lynching, but I hadn't really understood how widespread it was. And finally, there was one part that I still find funny, not because any of this is funny. In fact, it's horrifying. But it was the test to allow black voters. And in that test were some of the most insane questions you could imagine. How many bubbles are in a bar of soap, audience? Anyone know? Neither do I. Next is the Justice Memorial, and there I saw actually some places where my family lives. Orange County had one of the biggest cinder block coffin graves that I saw through that walk, and my Jewish grandmother lives in Irvine. So that was shocking. There were so many other names, and though I did not get the chance to read them all, I knew that even if I tried, I wouldn't be able to. That was how devastating the years before all of this, all of the progress we've made were. It's really taught me a lesson. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ava, and I also went on the trip with the class. So when our group was in Selma, Alabama, we were led on a city tour by Cherry Chestnut. Mr. Chestnut has dedicated his entire life to teaching others about the civil rights movement through guided tours of Selma. And he told us about his father, J.L. Chestnut Jr., who was Alabama's first black lawyer and had represented Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Freedom Marchers. Throughout the tour, Mr. Chestnut shared stories of going to protests and marches with his father, including his experience during Bloody Sunday when he was just 6 years old. The tour was jam-packed with so many incredible sights and stories, and it made our trip even more meaningful. Our tour started out at the infamous Brown Chapel, which was the starting point of the Selma to Montgomery march, voting march in 1965. After visiting Brown Chapel and the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, we drove through the streets of Selma as Mr. Chestnut pointed out sites such as the St. James Hotel, which is a pre-Civil War hotel, the Old Slavery Museum, the George Washington Carver neighborhoods, and more. For every site that Mr. Chestnut pointed out, he had an intimate and memorable story to go with it that made the experience even more personal. One spot that I found most memorable was when our group walked down the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is the location that Bloody Sunday took place. When walking down that bridge, I could not only just see photos and hear stories of the horrific events that took place on March 7th, but also walk in the footsteps of the same people that had been so brutally attacked on that day. I will never be able to truly understand the pain that those brave protesters endured, but being able to walk in their footsteps made the stories feel even more real than before and helped me empathize with them on an even deeper level. The thought that kids my age and younger were being subjected to such disgusting acts of violence is horrific. The last stop on our tour throughout Selma was a Confederate gravesite and memorial that was maintained by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. At this gravesite, there was a monument built in memorial of Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, a Confederate general and the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. This monument was built in 2005, making it only 19 years old. Mr. Chestnut brought us to this gravesite to demonstrate that while we may have come very far in the civil rights movement, there is still much work to be done. The memorial is so offensive it's almost hard to look at, but it describes Nathaniel Bedford Forrest as, quote, one of the South's finest heroes and a defender of Selma. Not only does the monument celebrate this disturbing, pathetic figure, but it also discredits and manipulates the brave activists and protesters that dedicated their life to civil rights. While this monument is deeply upsetting, it also serves as a reminder that the civil rights movement is not finished, and there is still work to be done. I consider the monument a source of motivation for all of us to do as much as possible to make a better future, just like the fearless activists that we have learned about on this trip have done for us. I think I speak for the whole group in saying that we are so grateful to have gotten this experience and for everyone that has made this trip possible. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Leo, and I just wanted to touch on my personal experience. I remember reading about the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 8th grade, reading, I think, March 1 through 3 by John Lewis, which are great books, and I completely recommend them. And just to be able to go to the place that I learned about and read about in person was incredibly meaningful. And Mr. Chestnut, the passion he had when he took us around and toured us and showed us all these incredible monuments, some not so incredible, as we touched on, but where a lot of stuff went down, it was very interesting and insightful. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Larit, and I have never been to the South before, and having never been to the South before, I didn't really know what to expect. However, after being there and experiencing all the rich history that was embedded into monuments, museums, and the state itself, my views have changed. I'm honored that I was able to walk the paths of so many important figures walked, all that have changed the way we live our lives today. I am forever grateful for the welcoming experience I had with this beautiful community during my time there. From the church participants to the servers at the Southern Cafe, there truly wasn't a moment where I felt unwelcome or unwanted. What's more is the wonderful speakers that educated us with their strong, empowering voices, whose stories will forever inspire me, have been some of the most memorable people I've ever met. What's more is that I was able to be in this amazing place with an amazing group of people. Being able to spend time with my friends and being able to form new friendships was a really significant part of this trip. I'm so gracious for our team leaders, Tamara, Noah, Adriana, Rachel, and Lindsay, for giving us the opportunity to partake in this experience and guiding us along the way.
This trip has truly been one of the most memorable and life-changing experiences I've ever had, and I will forever hold those memories. I could never have asked for a more engaging, informative, and impactful experience, and I am looking forward to many more.
Hi, my name is Maya.
Hi, I'm Evan.
Hi, I'm Tori. One of our last and most impactful experiences of the trip was talking to civil rights activist Joanne Bland. In her words, movements for social change are like jigsaw puzzles. Everyone is a unique and special piece. If your piece is missing, is the picture complete? In her lifetime, Joanne Bland has gone through an unimaginable amount of experiences that have tremendously affected her. Miss Bland was a part of the famous marches from Selma to Montgomery that occurred in 1965, attempting to gain voting rights for African Americans. It took 3 marches to successfully reach Montgomery. The first 2 times were unsuccessful because they were stopped, once violently, by the police. One of their attempts was an incident that became known as Bloody Sunday, where state troopers harmed the marchers using clubs, tear gas, and whips. Joanne Bland was only 6 years old during Bloody Sunday. During the attack, she passed out, and her sister was scared for her life. This traumatic experience stayed with her to this day.
She also reminded our group that being Jewish is something that if we need to, we can hide. That she, as a black woman, would never be able to hide the color of her skin. I hadn't thought much about it until our talk with Ms. Bland, but I've recently discovered comfort in being able to hide that part of my identity. Whether or not I want or need to tuck away being Jewish, it's something I was born with the freedom to do. Ms. Bland's strong sense of hope and ambition was admirable and inspiring. Jailed 13 times before the age of 11, she never stopped fighting, for herself, for her community, and for the many generations to come. She stressed to us the importance of our generation now standing up and doing our part for change. There is and will always be a great deal of work to be done.
Every day, we must decide how to use our freedom. A close friend of Joanne Bland said to us, "You must wake up and ask yourself each morning, how will you put your freedom to good use today? Then it's about how you have used your freedom. How did I use my freedom today?" Now, today, we must all ask ourselves what our piece in the puzzle for change is. The first step of our puzzle piece is teaching our Jewish community about our experience to spread awareness. And when we encounter injustice, we must speak up to try to educate and build relationships from everything we've learned. Right now, I want you to think, how can you make a difference in your community and the world? Remember, the puzzle piece cannot be complete without you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hi, I'm Talia. They told us, you are the change makers of today. You are the leaders of this generation. It's on your shoulders now to fix what is broken. Going to Alabama was truly an experience of a lifetime. We learned so much about the rich histories of cities like Selma and Montgomery, about the horrors that took place, and about the community that stuck with each other through it all. It felt surreal to stand in the footsteps of change makers like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, and most especially to learn the stories of these ordinary people who created extraordinary change. The names I'd never heard before, like Viola Liuzzo, who was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan for driving a black man over state lines. These people who risked everything to fight not only for their lives and rights, but for the rights of generations to come, who fought for something bigger than themselves. I think sometimes I get caught up in my own world and forget about the world of pain and suffering around me, and this trip brought me outside of myself. I learned that I was reminded that the fight for civil rights is nowhere near over. Yes, we've made so much progress since the 60s, but justice is far from being served. My generation has lost a sense of urgency in some sense. We no longer feel compelled to protest in the same way Joanne Bland and her friends did when they were our age. However, we cannot afford to be complacent or indifferent in the face of injustice. We must stand in solidarity with those who are marginalized and oppressed and lend our voices to their cause. Secondly, I learned the importance of bearing witness, to listen, to learn, and to amplify the voices of those whose stories are often silenced or ignored. We must confront the uncomfortable truths of our history and acknowledge the ways in which systemic racism continues to shape our society today. Only by acknowledging these truths can we begin to dismantle the structures of oppression and build a more inclusive and equitable future. Lastly, I learned that change begins with me, with my willingness to step outside my comfort zone, challenge the status quo, and take meaningful action. Whether it's through advocacy, activism, or community organizing, each of us has the power to make a difference. In my own experience, I often failed to take action. I left this trip feeling inspired and motivated to speak up, but then inertia set in and I never did. I think that standing up for change sometimes feels like it has to start with some big grand gesture or protest. And that feels overwhelming. But what I realized is that it starts with the small actions. No act of kindness or gesture of solidarity is ever too small to make a difference. Maybe it looks like calling classmates in when they make a racist joke or an anti-Semitic comment. Or maybe it's sharing the stories we were blessed enough to learn on our trip with those around us. It could be getting in touch and working with local organizations. But most importantly, I know that before I can educate others, I must continue to educate myself. And so that will be my first step. What is yours? Thank you and Shabbat Shalom.
Also, we put together a collection of some pictures that we took throughout the trip.
So feel free to browse and
Just take a look at what we did.
Thank you, everybody. I hope that you really enjoyed some of the reflections. I'm so proud of them and all the thoughts that they shared. We had some amazing conversations on this trip, and so if you have any more questions about their experience, I'm going to put them on blast, and you can ask them. Maybe not all the way up here, because they're all looking at me like they want to kill me for saying that, but maybe like in conversation. Thank you.
That was incredible. Thank you so much. I just want to echo what Dory said, that the key question is that we should wake up every single day and ask ourselves, what are you going to do with your freedom today? That is such a powerful question. Thank you all for this beautiful opportunity. We're gonna do no formal Q&A, but if you see these amazing people and want to ask them more about their trip, please do. These are gorgeous, so you're hired. Whoever did this, I love it. Thank you, and we'll say Birkat Hamazon together, and we'll close our evening. Shir Hamala B'Shu.